I think no matter how much you speak someone's language or understand their goals, if a relationship is transactional and they have 10 other transactional relationships with other departments, like, good luck. But if they like and respect you as a person and as a human, that's ultimately your pass to skip the line.
This is The Anonymous Marketer, a podcast where we tackle the biggest questions from the B2B marketing community. But instead of bringing on guests for a quick chat, every question comes from an anonymous source. These are the questions B2B marketers have but are afraid to ask. Let's start the conversation.
Hey, I'm Nick Bennett, and I'm excited to get into this episode and dive into some of the new anonymous questions that we received. But before we get into it, I wanted to do my part and highlight our supporters. In fact, the average employee sends around 10,000 emails per year. That means a company with 100 employees sends over 1 million emails annually. That's 1 million missed opportunities to showcase your brand, grow your funnel, and close more deals. OpenSense turns every employee email into a beautifully branded targeted ad channel that returns 4 to 7% CTR on average. Now, the best part, it's one simple platform to manage email signatures, promote upcoming events, distribute content, and more on Outlook and Gmail. No manual work, no tedious targeting, just better campaigns all at scale. Sign up for a demo at opensense.com and get 10% off today. If you're a marketer, it's likely you have attribution data spread across spreadsheets, your CRM, your marketing automation platform, and other places. With data all over the place, it's hard to understand what drives the highest quality leads. And that's why I want to tell you about HockeyStack. After adding one single line of code to your website, HockeyStack gives your company the ability to turn your marketing, sales, revenue, and product data into a unified picture. HockeyStack provides the analytics and attribution data your B2B company actually deserves. Get a free trial, and in 5 minutes, you can start using the product. Sign up today at hockeystack.com. Hey, I'm Nick Bennett. I'm excited to get into this episode and go through some new anonymous questions. But before we get into it, I wanted to do my part and highlight our supporters. As marketers, we want to create content that enables our sales team to win deals. But 70% of the content that we create for sales never gets used. It's a waste of time and energy. But it doesn't have to be this way, and that's why you should know about Allego. Allego is an all-in-one sales enablement platform designed to help revenue teams reach their full potential. Allego makes it easy for sellers to share content in the field with the right context, and it helps drive sales and marketing alignment, it increases collaboration, it optimizes messaging, and more importantly, it gets you more closed-won deals. To learn more, visit allego.com. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Anonymous Marketer. I'm your host, Nick Bennett. Today, we are going to explore a few questions around career growth and how to manage the leap from large company to startup. I have no one better than Ryan Narod, who is the VP of Marketing at Mutiny, to hang out with me today. And shout out to Mutiny. I was just at B2BMX, got to hang out with a lot of the team. Stuart, we had an amazing lunch together. So, Ryan, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick.
Cool. All right. So to get us started, let me talk about how we got these questions. So the 2 questions today came from our website. If you are a marketer out there and you want to submit a question to the show, head over to motionagency.io/anonymous. You'll see a form where you can submit, honestly, any question. Nothing's off limits. We've done questions around layoffs. We've done questions around how do you transition to a revenue organization, short-term, long-term marketing plays. So again, please submit your questions. It helps create the content for the show, honestly. And the goal here isn't to talk about the right or the wrong answer, it's to share perspective. And Ryan has honestly one of the interesting perspectives that I think around these questions. And we just want to start a conversation. So Ryan, let's jump into it if you're ready. I know I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Cool. All right. So the first anonymous question, and a couple things to keep in mind with this source. The person works at a SaaS revenue technology company, so something you and I can both align with there. The person works on a marketing team of 3 people, so smaller marketing team. And the question is, how do you go from manager to director in your career? What's your personal experience with that? So again, it's a great question. I feel like, myself and even you, like we've kind of, progressed throughout our careers. You've currently, VP of marketing. I feel like I've elevated. I'm currently the senior director, but I was an IC not too long ago. And so let's define the major differences between a manager and a director. So in your mind, Ryan, like what's the main difference between those roles in your opinion?
Yeah. So, I mean, typically in marketing, manager doesn't imply people management. Because marketing is so amorphous, it typically means you're managing a marketing program or a channel, whereas director implies that you are owning a function, right? Which includes setting the strategic direction of the function and then building up the ideal team to execute on that direction.
Yep. Absolutely agree. And do you feel like there's qualities or skills that you think are necessary for someone to make that transition?
Yeah, I mean, I think you first have to be a really good marketing manager, IC, right? And what that means is going from this mindset of, here's what I recommend to I actually just solved this problem proactive, right? And so to me, that means defining and executing on like department level initiatives without guidance. So you need to demonstrate that you can lead pretty large, high priority, cross functional strategic projects, communicate clearly, build consensus, and so on. So that makes you a really good IC. And once you nail that, then you build additional skills that help you make the leap to director. So that's number one, building a team. So understanding how to hire and recruit, designing an org that's effective and productive, coaching folks and giving feedback, and so on and so forth. Number two is setting a strategy. So that's defining the goals and projects for your team that ladder up to the big picture. So nobody's going to tell you what to do. That's on you to define. I think number three is just looking outward. So bringing in external thought leadership and big ideas into the org. And lastly, sort of being like a master conductor. So being able to work cross-functionally to unblock your team, making them successful, being really good at communication and influence.
Yeah. Those are honestly three great ones, super tactical. And I'm curious because I have someone on my team right now, senior manager title, wants to move to director in, the next 9 to 12 months. And so one of the things I was mentioning was that when you move to a director level, like, I'm thinking about stuff, even like a year plus out, not just like a quarter in front of me or 2 quarters in front of me. And I am curious, like, on your thoughts there, like, I know like aligning from a strategic level, but like you have to think like further out, right?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do, and you have to look around corners, right? So you have to sort of think about at a macro level, what is the growth of the company, right? So if like your company is growing 3x year over year, then your marketing targets need to evolve. Before anyone even gives you targets, your marketing targets need to grow 3x year over year. What does that mean for you month over month? And as you think about your program scaling, at that rate month over month, you sort of have to look a little bit around the corner as to what programs are reaching their upper limit and what are the programs like SEO that you need to start investing in today that may actually only start bearing fruit 6 months from now. And so that's a very tactical look at like targets. But I think the difference between a manager and a director here is that a manager may wait for targets to get handed to them and say, oh, shoot, now I need to scramble to build programs. Someone who's looking a little bit longer term can now start to see, what are the programs I need to build today to help me execute on the goals that I may get 6 months or a year from now.
Yeah, great advice for sure. Can you share like a specific instance where you had to demonstrate kind of like your leadership skills as a manager and like how did that or how could that prepare you for your role as a director?
Yeah. So before I got into startups, I was at Google and there I was a sort of an IC senior manager level. And I was working on a demand gen program for the cloud business. And it was pretty early days. Like I think there were 30 people in marketing. And by contrast, 2 years later, there were 400 people in marketing. And so in those early days, there was no SDR team. There were just enterprise AEs. And so all the leads that my programs were generating, I realized there was nobody on the sales side to work these leads and meetings. And that was, in a startup, that would be a big problem. At a company like Google, like marketing was just committed to leads. Nobody was really measuring like how those leads flow through to pipeline or to revenue. But I felt that that was problematic, right? So I took it upon myself to solve that problem. I kind of went on a listening tour to understand like what are all the sales teams around that can work these leads. I proactively started meeting with like external call center vendors to see, what that might look like and build out sort of a cost model there. And eventually, like my decision was we should use marketing dollars to build like an outsourced SDR team that works these leads because there was nobody internally that was going to do that. And in an org like Google, that's no small feat, right? Like it's a little political, like it's marketing on a sales type function. Who was I to do that? And so I knew that I was going to step into like hundreds of meetings where I have to sort of either defend this or make a case for it. I'd never managed a sales team before or an SDR team, but you sort of, had the position to learn by doing, and it let me show impact. Like I was able to show that before we were generating all these leads, generating nothing. And when we implemented something like this, it cost us X. And when we, built this outsourced SDR team, like here's the actual revenue in dollars that we were bringing in. And that became indisputable. And so as the org was growing and there were full-time folks who were hired, like I said, that marketing team went from like 30 to 400. It put me in a position to almost like dictate as new people coming in, what roles they should be filling, right? Like the job that I was doing is now like 30 people's jobs. And so even though I wasn't formally a director or even formally in a position of people management, it gave me a taste of like what that would look like, setting a strategy. And then as people are hired, saying, you take this part of it, you take that part of it.
Love that. That's really great advice. I feel like it's hard because this is something that, I've been in a director level role for probably 2.5 years or almost 3 years now. And so I feel like when you're balancing the day-to-day responsibilities of not only managing a team, but you have like the strategic responsibilities of a director, it's tough. And it's like, for someone in today's world, like I feel like for me, I'm trying to balance, everything from like the work piece of it, the day to day, but then it's like, you've got like the podcast, you've got all these other things that are going on and it becomes a lot and like it can wear on people. And I'm curious, how do you balance everything that you do from like a day to day perspective, or like, how would you even recommend that to people?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in operating cadences, which is really for me a fancy way of saying how you spend your Monday to Friday. And I think if each day has a purpose, it helps you strike that balance versus playing whack-a-mole every single day. So for my teams, like I'll give you an example of like how I think about Monday through Friday. Every day has a purpose. So Monday, I have each team under me meet with each other and prepare for the week. And while they're doing that, I'm focused on looking backwards at the previous week and preparing for things like our all hands, metrics reviews with leadership, like recapping what happened last week. That's Monday. Tuesday, every team meets with me and shares what they're focused on this week and longer term. So they're like, they have their Monday meeting, they're ready, and Tuesday is really productive. It's like, here's our dashboard. Here's where we're at from a metrics perspective. Here's what we're prioritizing. I provide feedback for them. And I also help them connect the dots cross-functional. Oh, you should go work with this person. You should go work with this other part of the marketing org. And so that's what that touch point is for. Then Wednesday is heads down time for everyone, myself included. It's like Wednesday is a sacred no meeting day. And then Thursday is a one-on-one day. And because Tuesday was tactical, Wednesday was heads down day, this is where I could focus on things like career development, feedback and coaching. And we really get to zoom out on Thursday. And then Friday is when folks wrap up the week. So we have everyone post the Slack up, which is a summary of your week in Slack. And so you share wins from the week, your focus for next week. And what that does is it's a nice celebration. There's a lot of like emojis and comments on people's Slack ups. And it opens up doors for like, oh, well, let's work together on this project next week. And it's also a helpful reminder on Monday after the long weekend and people forget everything. People look back at their Slack ups and are like, okay, here's where I need to pick up where I left off. So that's my like Monday through Friday operating cadence. And, I find that it helps having a purpose for each day helps you keep you and your teams really, really focused.
I love that. That's great. I feel like, that's something I've done that in the past actually, and I really enjoy that. And sometimes like right now what I'm having is, a few people do as well is like drop just a quick Loom video. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say I'm against meetings, but I sit in a lot of meetings and just I'm sure you do as well. And it's just a great way to quickly showcase like what you're working on. And so like we have people drop quick Loom videos on certain projects that they're doing. And it's a really great way to showcase like one, like how people critically think, but like again, it's like it's not just a text post because that can be, sometimes it can get misinterpreted and things could happen. But if you can quickly like show a quick Loom video or whatever you use, like just walk me through something and like I can watch it at my speed. I don't have to like hop on a call with you because we have one-on-ones and everything as is. And that's been really, really helpful. And we build out these career growth plans that we look at on a quarterly basis on top of that. So we look at like what do people actually want to accomplish for the upcoming quarter? And then what can we do to help them accomplish that? And then what is that long-term vision of like, where do they want to go? Like ultimately, we have I don't want to say it's like a scoring system, but we have a piece where like everyone knows where they are on like a list of like from a title perspective and then what they need to do to get to that next piece. So that's where we focus like the career growth plans around. And people have loved it. People have said this is incredibly helpful. It's clear, it's concise. I know what I need to do to get there. And I would definitely recommend something like that if people aren't doing it today for sure. So yeah. But let's talk professional development because I feel like that's a big one. And I feel like for me, I turn to communities. I mean, again, like with the pandemic, I feel like everyone turned to communities. I do the majority of my learning through LinkedIn, through one-on-ones, through connecting with other like-minded people. What would you recommend for someone that's looking for professional development opportunities to kind of help you grow in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I think I totally agree with you. Like the channels are all the same that everyone has access to, right? Like LinkedIn there, but if you're able to filter it down, there's nuggets on a real gold that you can get between all the vendor pitches. Communities, I think, are super helpful, specifically the ones that host roundtables. So we have our own m2.community if you want to check it out, where, we host biweekly roundtables that are persona based. So we get together marketers who are focused on ABM or paid and have really great discussions there. I learn a lot from those. There are newsletters, like I get really deep into newsletters. Like there's one called MQT1 on Substack that I think is like one of the best right now. And so those are kind of like resources that, I tap and I encourage others to tap. But I think in general, hearing from others is like, will help you talk the talk. But in order to like learn to walk the walk, you just need to get into situations where you feel completely in over your head. And it's like learning to swim. You can learn all the strokes and whatnot, but you can't really swim until you get in the water and start flopping around and feel like you're going to drown. And, ultimately like it's that feeling that is a forcing function for you to really develop and grow.
Yep. Love that. Awesome. All right. I got one question before we move to the second question here. What advice would you give if you could say, all right, hey, listen, like do these 2 or 3 things, would you give to someone who's looking to make that transition from like a manager to like a director type role? And like, what do you see as the key steps for success in this?
Yeah. I think the biggest shift that you're going to have to make is to realize that you're no longer responsible for your own success. In fact, you're not even in control of your own success. It's the success of others that matters. And so the skill set goes from being good at your job to guiding others to be good at their job. And so you have to sort of let go of this feeling, I can do this thing better, faster, so I'll just do it one time, because that takes away a learning opportunity from someone and it's hard to reverse. Like you get into the cycle and there's no such thing as just one time. And so, there will also be situations where you have to lead or manage someone who's better than you at a particular thing. And so you have to shift your mindset of, going from like, they'll learn from me to I'll learn from them. And that's hard. Like people have a hard time hiring folks who you feel like, what are they going to learn from you? And so you have to learn what your role in that equation is. And typically I find that you should kind of ask questions from a first principles perspective, like seek to understand the why behind everything. And really your role in that is to connect the dots. Like typically you are where you are because you are a master at, working cross-functionally and unblocking things. And so that's first and foremost your role. And the phrase I love that I didn't make this up, but you have to go from playing an instrument to conducting an orchestra. And so that's what I always think about. It's not about like playing your instrument really well. You're conducting an orchestra where you have people playing instruments that you've never played in your life. And it's not about teaching them how to play their instrument. It's about making sure that it sounds harmonious with all the other instruments in the orchestra and everyone is on pace.
Love that. That's really great advice. I love that. I think it's actionable. I think people could take this and like run with it and implement it in their lives. So I want to jump to the second question. So again, a couple things to keep in mind with this source is this person works at a software company. The company has between 1,001 and 5,000 employees. A bigger company. They work on a marketing team of 25 plus people. So the question is, how can I have an impact going from a smaller company to a large one? I came from a smallish company with a 10-person marketing team. Now I lead a marketing function in a large matrixed organization. There are so many people and teams who are involved in every single project or campaign, and everything is so dependent on these shared resources that are pulled in a million different directions. It makes what used to be simple extremely complex. Any advice for managing this change? So, from your experience, how did you initially approach it? I mean, I know you were at Google, I guess, anything from your experience, like how could someone say like, listen, I'm on a smaller team. How do I go to a larger one? And like, what challenges can people face in this process?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've gone from actually having my own business to Google to startups. So I've sort of gone both directions and, having my own business, it was like the least structure I was exposed to because there was nobody expecting structure from me. Right. So a lot of the insight and knowledge and direction was like in my head. And so going to a company like Google, it was the first time in my career that I was exposed to the need for intense structure. Like I remember having my first one-on-one and my manager was like, okay, what's your agenda? And I said, I don't know. I didn't know I was supposed to have an agenda. And if you contrast that, and then when I went to a startup, I was like the only one who had an agenda. And so when I see people go from like a startup to a big company and not have that muscle, like I understand where it comes from, right? You just like, were never exposed to it. I think, as far as like what that muscle is and like, how do you flex it when you've never been exposed to it? I think it's about over documentation and communication. It's like when you have a thought, start a doc. And every meeting, it's like, you're not just there to discuss. You prepare, what are the outcomes I want to get out of this meeting? You start a notes doc. You like make sure you end the meeting with action items. You share the notes and the action items in an email after the meeting. And that may seem like highly formal or overdone, but people will appreciate it, especially in a larger company. And you're going to sort of be perceived as someone who has their stuff together. And even when you go to a startup after that, like you may be the only one doing that, but everyone will sort of catch up and meet your level of preparedness over documentation and communication.
It's such a good one. So I've never really worked for like a larger company personally. I've always, for the most part, worked in like startups. Series B to Series D is kind of been my sweet spot. But like I did work for one company where like we were very much aligned. Like one, all meetings had to be like 25 minutes or end 5 minutes before the next thing. And it was just the CEO was very much like, it has to be this way. And so there would always be, we had a specific name of it and I forget it now, but like everything was action item based. And I feel like it's very hard because I mean, in the startup world, like there's times where in the past lives, I've sat in meetings and they just talk in circles. And then the meeting ends and nothing gets accomplished. Then you have a meeting to discuss the meeting. And it's like, I love your way so much better because if everyone could implement that, one, we would probably cut down on a lot of like extra conversations that don't need to happen. And like we could be a lot more focused. But how do you prioritize your time and resources when there's so many people? Like when you were at Google, like there's so many teams, so many people involved in everything. Like, how do you figure out where to spend your time?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I could try to give you a more recent example. Like right now, even, we're a company of just shy of 100 people, but you have to, both as a IC and as a team lead, you sort of have to think about how you prioritize your time, especially when you're growing really fast and there's lots of needs from across the company. And so as I think about my function right now, we're running a pretty lean team, and most of our targets historically were focused on customer acquisition. So that's where I've always devoted 90% of my time and resources to the targets that I'm signed up for. And, now we have asks from across the company that don't necessarily align neatly to our targets. So sales is asking for more enablement, and enablement's good, but it doesn't necessarily help you with pipeline. Product is asking for launches, and every product manager thinks that their launch is the most important. Our customer success team is asking for help for onboarding. And so, you need to balance all of these things. And so my question I always ask is, what can we tie to an OKR or a metric that we're already signed up for? And so in the examples that I gave, like the one I'd pick out is launches, because a launch is actually done right can help us drive more pipeline. And that's the number that, everyone sort of has muscle memory around own. So that's like one factor. The second one is like, what's important to the company? Like if you listen to your CEO and the board, what are they saying is most important, even if it's outside of your core metric? And maybe that would make the case for everyone's talking about retention. So maybe the root cause of poor retention is bad onboarding. So if you make onboarding better, can you help with the retention problem? That's another factor you might consider. The third factor you might consider is what are the people on the team, or if you're an IC, what are you energized by? And what do they view as a chore? That might play a role. And so as you weigh all these things, you're going to have to prioritize and make decisions on what do you take on and what do you don't. And I think importantly, for the things you decline, you need to explain to those teams why you've declined to do that and what the trade-offs are. And it's not so much of we're not going to do this. It's we're not going to do this right now because here are all the other things that we're prioritized. If we were to take this on, if we were to take on customer onboarding, then we would have to deprioritize, launches, and nobody would want that. Right. And so you sort of have to make that case. And I think building the systems and the processes where people have visibility into what you're working on, proactively avoid these conversations where you have to explain these trade-offs because they're so visible.
That's so good. Which would now brings me to my next point is how do you actually, I guess, build relationships cross-functionally, not only within marketing, because again, when you're a smaller company, you can just hey, you have probably great relationships with products, CS, all these pieces. But when you're at a bigger company, it's not always as easy. And for me, especially as you get involved with the sales side and being a traditional field marketer, it's I had to have a relationship with sales. That was my internal customer. But I also had to have really close relationships with finance, because ultimately they were signing all of the contracts and budgets that I wanted to run for programs. So how would you manage that for people that don't report directly under you, but you rely heavily on them to get stuff done?
Yeah. I mean, I think my generic advice is try to understand their goals and speak their language and all that. But I think folks have heard that advice before. I think for me, on top of all that, I just rely on building a really strong personal relationship. I think no matter how much you speak someone's language or understand their goals, if a relationship is transactional and they have 10 other transactional relationships with other departments, good luck. But if they like and respect you as a person and as a human, that's ultimately your path to skip the line. And so as much as possible, go out of your way to get coffee with folks. We're in a remote world, but when you're in town, it's a perfect excuse to go take someone out to lunch or to dinner. In Mutiny, we have company-wide offsites every single quarter. And that's a great opportunity to build bonds that transcend your day-to-day life on Zoom. And so it sounds a little generic, build relationships that are personal, but I think if you can throw away all the transactional stuff and really get to know a person get to know what their families are like, get to know what motivates them in a really genuine way, right? Like you can't game. This is about people. I think that helps you sort of skip the line and build bridges that sort of transcend management structures or anything like that.
Love that. Really great advice. And I agree. I mean, for me, like everything that I've been like trying to focus on now is like, how do you shift from a company first go to market strategy to a people first go to market strategy? Because ultimately, I mean, we know people buy from people. It's not anything that's, earth changing. Everyone knows that. But like, how do you put an actual person behind the email that's being sent? Or how do you reply from an actual person to a review that you're getting? Or how do you focus on working, with creators? As personally, selfishly, like that's what I'm focused on. Like, how can I like build relationships with creators and get them to like want to collaborate on cool projects together? So I agree. I think that's definitely important. So last question before we wrap things up. What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in a similar position? And what do you see as like the key skills and qualities needed to succeed in a large matrixed organization?
Yeah. I would probably say there are three things. Number one is just like the soft skills around building relationships that are not transactional, like what we just talked about. I think first and foremost, you've got to have that. Number two, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like the idea of being really good at like documentation and process orientation. Like how do you build a process that's cross-functional? How do you understand, mutually exclusive metrics ownership and sort of influence without necessarily managing? And then number three is communication. Like how do you run a meeting with a lot of people in it, make it feel productive, get others' input, whether you need it or not, synthesize that input, communicate out like what the decisions were. These are things that just kind of take, I would say, emulating someone that you respect that does this well. And I think like I've learned that way. And I think that's like ultimately the best way to learn. Find someone in your organization that's really effective at this, whether they're your mentor or not, and just emulate that behavior.
Love that. Great advice. Awesome. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me. A few things. If you are a marketer and you're listening to this, make sure to submit your anonymous question by visiting motionagency.io/anonymous. And if you are not following Ryan on LinkedIn, although I feel like you don't really post as much anymore as you used to, probably you're very busy, but the entire Mutiny team is amazing. I just hung out with them. Big fan. Met Brian for the first time, by the way, as well. So if you're not following Ryan or the entire Mutiny team, make sure to go give them a follow. And Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Awesome. All right. We will catch you on the next episode of The Anonymous Marketer. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks for checking out this episode of The Anonymous Marketer. For more episodes, check us out wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or visit us on the web at motionagency.io/anonymous. And finally, this show is produced by Motion, a done-for-you podcast agency for small, scrappy B2B tech marketers. To learn how you can launch and grow a podcast for your company, visit motionagency.io.